In the grim darkness of the far future, there is no peace, no comfort, only labor, sweat, and endless suffering. Imagine waking up every morning not to sunlight, but to the blinding glow of industrial fire. You breathe in smoke instead of air. You taste metal and dust instead of food. And your every heartbeat is owned not by you, but by the Imperium. You are a worker, a tiny cog in the endless machine of the God Emperor's empire. Your world is not a home, it's a factory. Cities stretch higher than mountains, choking the skies with smoke, while the ground trembles from the roar of a million machines. There are no weekends, no freedom, no hope. You work or you die. And even death is no escape. Because your body may be recycled, your bones crushed into mortar, your organs repurposed for the next loyal servant of humanity. Each day, you carry out your duty, not out of love, but out of fear. The overseers watch. The priests preach that suffering is holy, that your pain is your offering to the Emperor himself. And so you obey. Because disobedience doesn't just mean execution, it means damnation. Yet in the silence between the factory sirens, you sometimes wonder, do the stars above ever shine on people who are free? Or is the entire galaxy just another forge, grinding souls into dust? This is the life of a worker in Warhammer40K, a life where hope is heresy, mercy is weakness, and survival itself is a miracle. So open your mind and witness the horror hidden beneath the machine, the horrifying existence of those who build the Imperium. One drop of blood at a time. The life of a worker in the Imperium of Man is a cycle of unending toil, a sentence that begins at birth and ends only when the body can no longer move. From the moment they open their eyes, these laborers are surrounded by the roar of machines that never stop, by the clang of metal striking metal, and by the suffocating scent of oil and smoke that seeps into every breath they take. The Imperium is built on the backs of billions who will never see the stars they work beneath. Billions who give their entire existence to maintain the vast, decaying empire of the God-Emperor. Each factory world, known as a forge or hive world, is an endless labyrinth of industry miles of assembly lines, furnace pits, power conduits, and cargo lifts stretching across continents. The air is thick with pollution, so dense that sunlight never reaches the ground. Instead, the workers live under the flickering light of lumen lamps, their skin pale and sickly from years of exposure to chemicals and recycled air. Every breath burns the lungs, every movement aches. And yet they continue, because stopping even for a moment is punishable by death or worse. Their shifts last not hours, but entire rotations. Some work for days without sleep, sustained only by the synthetic rations issued by their overseers. Time has no meaning here. The cycle of labor replaces any sense of night or day. A worker might live his whole life without ever seeing the sky. The factories never sleep, and neither can those who keep them alive. The sound of machinery becomes their heartbeat, the rhythm of production, their only sense of purpose. The Imperium demands production at any cost. It does not care for the weak, the old, or the sick. Those who fall behind are simply discarded, replaced by the next generation of laborers bred for obedience. Children are raised in manufactorums, learning to handle tools before they can even speak properly. Their education is simple: efficiency, endurance, and faith. They are told that the Emperor watches over them, that every rivet hammered, every bolt tightened, is a holy act in service to humanity. To doubt this is treason. To question it is heresy. In this world, human life is cheaper than metal. If a machine breaks, it is repaired. If a worker breaks, they are replaced. The overseers, often augmented with bionic limbs or mechanical eyes, move through the lines with whips of energy, ensuring that not a single hand slows down. Their voices are monotone, their patience non-existent. They do not see people. They see tools. And tools must function. The workers' bodies bear the marks of this existence. Their hands are scarred from molten metal, their lungs blackened by fumes, their backs twisted from years of lifting and bending. Many die before reaching 30, collapsing at their stations, their hearts giving out under the constant strain. But death brings no release. The body is dragged away, stripped of anything useful, and replaced by another laborer who doesn't dare look up from their task. In some factories, the dead are recycled into nutrient paste to feed the living. In others, their corpses are offered to the mechanicus for reclamation. Every moment of their existence is dictated by the machine. The blare of sirens signals the beginning of a new shift. Conveyor belts begin to move, and a million arms follow in perfect, mechanical unison. There is no talking, no rest, no individuality. Each person is a cog in a vast mechanism that cannot stop. If one fails, the others absorb the burden. If one collapses, the overseer's lash ensures the rest work harder to compensate. There is no solidarity, no brotherhood, only survival. Even their dreams belong to the machine. When they sleep, it is in cramped dormitories stacked with hundreds of bunks. Each worker allotted a few hours of unconsciousness before the alarms drag them back to their station. The air smells of sweat, oil, and despair. Yet they do not complain. They cannot. The Imperial Creed has taught them that their suffering is divine, that pain purifies the soul, that labor pleases the Emperor. So they endure it with bowed heads and trembling hands, whispering prayers to the golden God who will never hear them. There are no names here, only numbers. A worker's identity is erased, replaced with a designation burned onto their uniform. Their family, if they ever had one, becomes irrelevant. Relationships are discouraged. Affection is seen as a distraction. The only love permitted is devotion to duty. In this way, the Imperium ensures obedience not through loyalty, but through hopelessness. Sometimes, when the machinery grows quiet during maintenance, a worker might allow themselves a fleeting moment of thought, a dangerous act in itself. They might wonder what lies beyond the walls of the manufactorum, or whether other worlds are different. But such thoughts are poison. The fear of the overseers, the priests, and the Inquisition keeps their curiosity buried deep. Ignorance is survival. Knowledge is death. The Adeptus Mechanicus, masters of industry and machine worship, oversee many of these worlds. To them, the workers are not truly human. They are extensions of the sacred machines, vessels of flesh that serve the Omnissiah's will. The workers pray to the same engines they serve, chanting litanies as they tighten bolts and feed fuel into reactors. They are told that every spark is divine, every malfunction a test of faith. The irony is cruel. They pray to the very devices that consume their lives. On the rare occasion when a worker slows down or collapses, the punishment is immediate. Public execution serves as a warning to others. The unlucky ones might be dragged to the servitor vats, their consciousness stripped away, their bodies wired into a new form of slavery, mechanical and eternal. The fear of becoming one of those mindless constructs keeps most workers silent and obedient. They know the machine never forgets. To live as a worker in the Imperium is to exist without dreams, without ambition, without self. It is to wake, work, and die, all in service to a God who demands everything and gives nothing in return. The very concept of rest or reward is alien to them. The Emperor's light, they are told, shines on the faithful. But in truth, it never reaches the factory floors where the faithful live and die. They build weapons they will never use, ships they will never see, monuments they will never touch. Their sweat fuels the endless wars of an empire that doesn't even know their names. And yet, through all of this, they continue because they must. Because somewhere deep inside them, buried beneath the exhaustion and the fear, is the faint, stubborn instinct to survive, even if survival itself has lost all meaning. Dehumanization in the Imperium of Man is not a policy, it is the natural state of existence. For the workers who fill the endless factories, the mines, the refineries, and the shipyards of a million worlds, humanity has long since been stripped away. They are not citizens, not individuals, not even people in the sense that once defined the species of mankind. They are numbers, functions, and flesh machines, living tools shaped for labor, molded by fear, and broken by purpose. Every part of their identity is reduced to their utility. To exist in the Imperium as a worker is to be denied the right to self. The system begins its process of erasure from the very moment of birth. In the hive cities and forge worlds, children are not raised by families, but by institutions designed to shape them into obedient laborers. They are cataloged, sorted, and assigned roles before they are old enough to understand what a choice even means. Individual thought is seen as inefficiency, creativity as rebellion. Every aspect of life is programmed to enforce conformity. Uniforms replace clothes, identification codes replace names, prayers replace feelings. The idea of I dissolves into we, and we is always in service to the machine. Their bodies are conditioned for endurance, not comfort. Nutrition is measured in calories needed to maintain output, sleep in hours required to prevent collapse. Even emotion is a liability. Workers are taught to suppress anger, grief, or longing, because such feelings interfere with productivity. The priests of the ecclesiarchy preach that personal desires are the root of sin, that individuality is a weakness that endangers the collective faith of humanity. To think of oneself is to stray from the emperor's path. So the workers learn to hide their humanity behind masks of submission, repeating the same prayers until belief and obedience become indistinguishable. In the manufactorums, faces blur together. Millions of workers perform identical motions in unison, moving like extensions of the machines they serve. Their voices are lost beneath the noise of pistons and turbines. The overseers do not call them by name, they call them by number, by station, by quota. To the Imperium, one worker is the same as another, infinitely replaceable, eternally expendable. If one falls, 10 more stand ready to take their place. This is not cruelty. It is efficiency. And efficiency is divine. Their working environments reinforce this loss of self. There are no mirrors, no personal spaces, no symbols of individuality. The walls are coated with grime and propaganda posters reminding them that loyalty is duty and duty is life. Their living quarters are identical metal boxes stacked by the hundreds, each containing a bunk, a sink, and little else. The only decoration allowed is a small emblem of the Aquila, the two-headed eagle that watches them even in their sleep. It is a constant reminder that they belong not to themselves, but to the Emperor. The dehumanization extends far beyond the physical realm. It seeps into their minds, shaping how they perceive themselves. They are taught to fear their own thoughts. The idea of questioning orders, of imagining a different life, is not just dangerous, it is blasphemy. To think against the Imperium is to think against God. This indoctrination ensures that even in private moments, even when no one is watching, the worker polices their own thoughts. They confess imagined sins to the priests, begging forgiveness for emotions they were never allowed to have. Many of these workers no longer remember what it means to feel pride, love, or joy. Their memories blur into the monotony of labor. Some forget their own faces, having never seen a reflection. They measure their lives not in years, but in quotas met, shifts survived, accidents avoided. The only acknowledgement of their existence comes when they fail. A malfunction, a moment of hesitation, a mistake, and suddenly the overseer's lash or the Adeptus Arbite's gunfire reminds them that they are disposable. The Imperium does not reward success. It merely punishes failure less severely. The use of propaganda plays a crucial role in maintaining this system. The ecclesiarchy floods every factory and hab block with sermons declaring that suffering is holy and labor is sacred. The workers are told that their pain feeds the emperor, that their submission ensures humanity's survival. Statues of the god emperor loom over them, cold and unfeeling, carved from stone and steel. They are told to find comfort in the idea that their lives have purpose, but that purpose is never their own. Their worth is measured only in how much they can endure. Those who begin to lose their humanity in mind often lose it in body as well. The Adeptus Mechanicus sees no boundary between flesh and machine. When a worker is injured, the damaged part is replaced with crude bionics, not to heal them, but to restore their function. Over time, some become more metal than man, their limbs replaced by tools, their eyes by lenses. These augmentations are not blessings. They are reminders of ownership. A mechanical arm means the mechanicus owns that piece of you. A cybernetic implant means your loyalty is now literally wired into your brain. The line between worker and servitor grows thin, until some are barely distinguishable from the mindless drones they once feared to become. Even language itself reinforces their dehumanization. Words like comrade or friend have long vanished from use. Instead, the lexicon of the worker revolves around function, unit, operator, subject. There's no word for freedom. The idea has been erased from thought. To imagine it would be to court heresy, to risk the wrath of the Inquisition. Those who dare whisper about another life, one without chains, soon disappear. Their absence explained as reassignment or maintenance duty. Everyone knows what it means, but no one speaks of it. The few who retain fragments of their humanity often find it unbearable. They feel guilt for longing, fear for remembering, pain for caring. The system isolates them until even companionship becomes impossible. To trust another worker is dangerous. To speak honestly is fatal. Eyes are everywhere: mechanical drones, servo skulls, and informants trained to report disobedience. Paranoia replaces connection. Silence replaces solidarity. A worker's only safe companion is the machine, and even it demands everything without mercy. Over generations, this cycle produces something far worse than slavery. It creates beings who no longer know they were ever free. They obey without thought, labor without question, and pray without belief. They exist not as people, but as extensions of the Imperium's will, a living infrastructure built on submission. This is not accidental. It is the intended result of a system that survives by consuming souls as fuel. Every mechanism of the Imperium, from its bureaucracy to its religion, is designed to strip away individuality and replace it with obedience. The workers are told that they are nothing, and in time, they believe it. Their hands become tools, their minds circuits of faith, their hearts hollow chambers echoing with the chant of devotion. They no longer dream, because dreaming is dangerous. They no longer hope, because hope is forbidden. They no longer live, because living is not required to serve. Religious indoctrination within the Imperium of Man is one of its most powerful and insidious forms of control. It begins long before a worker ever sets foot in a manufactorum. From the moment of birth, the teachings of the ecclesiarchy saturate every aspect of existence. The first sound a newborn hears is not a lullaby, but the chant of the ministorum priests, blessing them in the name of the God Emperor. Every lesson, every story, every piece of knowledge they are allowed to receive reinforces a single truth: that suffering is sacred, that obedience is holy, and that to serve without question is the highest form of faith. The worker is not merely enslaved by chains of metal or duty, but by belief. The ecclesiarchy's presence is everywhere. Cathedrals tower above the industrial hives, their spires piercing the smog-filled skies. The workers look up at them not as places of peace, but as reminders of the all-seeing divinity that governs their lives. The voice of the priest echoes through loudspeakers that never fall silent, reciting endless litanies that sanctify labor and condemn doubt. The workers hear these words day and night until they become as mechanical as the factory noise that surrounds them. There is no distinction between religion and reality. The two have fused into one. Every shift begins with prayer. Workers bow their heads, chanting the same verses that have been repeated for millennia. They pray to the Emperor for strength, for endurance, for forgiveness for the sins they did not commit. The priests walk among them in ornate robes of red and gold, their faces lit by the glow of sacred incense burners. They bless the machines, sprinkling holy oils over gears and pistons, declaring each motion a divine act. The workers are told that to repair a cog is to heal the Emperor's body. To hammer a rivet is to strike against the enemies of mankind. Labor becomes worship. Pain becomes prayer. The ecclesiarchy teaches that the Emperor sacrificed his mortal form to protect humanity. And in return, humanity must sacrifice everything for him. This belief ensures that no worker ever questions their misery. When their bodies ache, they are told it pleases the Emperor. When they starve, they are told it is a test of faith. When their loved ones die, they are told it is his will. Every injustice, every cruelty, every deprivation is justified as divine necessity. The workers learn to thank the Emperor for their suffering, to weep with gratitude for the privilege of existing in pain. The priests enforce this faith, not with kindness, but with fear. To doubt the Emperor is not merely a sin, it is a crime, punishable by death or damnation. Heresy is the most unforgivable offense, and the definition of heresy is broad enough to include even silence at the wrong time. Priests remind the workers that the Emperor sees all, that his gaze pierces every shadow, that even a disloyal thought is enough to condemn the soul. This fear seeps into every conversation, every dream, every moment of weakness. The workers learn to censor their minds, to think only what is safe, to feel only what is permitted. Rituals of devotion are woven into their daily routines. Before each shift, they recite hymns to the Omnissiah and the Emperor. During work, they hum the rhythmic prayers of endurance, matching the tempo of the machines. When accidents occur, and they always do, the priests lead the survivors in chants of gratitude, thanking the Emperor for sparing their lives and welcoming the fallen as martyrs of labor. Even death is not free from devotion. Corpses are burned in sacred furnaces, their ashes scattered into the machinery to bless production. The worker's existence, from birth to death, becomes a continuous ritual with no separation between worship and work. The priests themselves are both shepherds and executioners. They speak with honeyed words of salvation, but their authority is absolute. They can condemn a worker to death with a single accusation of heresy, and no one will question it. To doubt a priest is to doubt the Emperor. To refuse confession is to embrace damnation. Confession is a constant ritual, one that strips away privacy and autonomy. Workers line up in endless queues to admit to sins they do not understand: impure thoughts, fatigue, hesitation. The priest listens, absolves, and reports. The cycle of guilt never ends, because guilt itself is the tool that maintains obedience. Religious indoctrination is not limited to sermons. The architecture of the Imperium itself preaches submission. The factories are built like temples with towering arches, stained glass depicting the Emperor's victories, and statues of saints watching from the shadows. Even the machines are adorned with purity seals and scripture. Every bolt, every lever, every pipe is marked with the imperial creed. To touch them without prayer is blasphemy. To repair them without blessing is heresy. In this world, faith is not separate from function. It is embedded in every mechanism, every movement, every breath. The songs of the ecclesiarchy fill the air through voxcasters, merging with the sound of grinding metal and hissing steam. Workers hum these hymns unconsciously as they labor, their voices blending into the chorus of the machine. The repetition of holy words dulls the mind, replacing thought with ritual. Over time, faith becomes reflex, obedience becomes instinct. The workers no longer need to be told what to believe. They have become belief itself, molded into instruments of divine servitude. The clergy often remind them of the horrors beyond the Imperium, the heretics, mutants, and Xenos waiting to destroy mankind. The priests describe these enemies in such vivid, terrifying detail that the workers come to see themselves as soldiers in an unseen war. Their labor is no longer just survival, it is battle. Every stroke of the hammer, every rotation of the wheel, is a strike against the forces of darkness. In this way, religion transforms exploitation into heroism. The worker becomes proud of his chains, grateful for his suffering, convinced that his endless toil is saving the galaxy. Even education is a form of worship. Literacy is restricted to the holy texts approved by the Ministorum. Workers are taught the scriptures of the Imperial Creed, but never the knowledge to interpret them. The priests recite the words, the workers repeat them. There is no understanding, only repetition. In this way, the ecclesiarchy maintains absolute control over knowledge. To know too much is dangerous, for knowledge breeds doubt, and doubt is sin. Sometimes, amidst the endless sermons and rituals, a worker will falter. Perhaps he wonders why the emperor remains silent, why his prayers go unanswered, why his suffering never ends. The priests have prepared for this. They call such thoughts temptations of the warp, whispers of chaos meant to lead the soul astray. The only cure is confession and punishment. The worker is made to kneel, to repent, to beg for mercy he will never receive. The pain of repentance becomes proof of redemption. The lesson is clear. Questioning faith is the greatest of evils, and obedience is salvation. The indoctrination is so deep that even those who die under the weight of their labor die with prayers on their lips. Their last thoughts are not of freedom or love, but of loyalty. They thank the emperor for the strength to serve. Their ashes become offerings to the same God who demanded their lives. In the Imperium, religion is not merely a belief system, it is a mechanism of control. A structure that turns humanity into fuel, ensuring that the fires of devotion burn forever, even as the people who feed them disappear into smoke and dust. Surveillance and fear are the invisible chains that bind every worker in the Imperium of Man. They live under a gaze that never blinks, a presence that never sleeps, and a system that feeds on obedience. In the hive cities and manufactorums, every corridor, every dormitory, every workstation is watched by mechanical eyes and human ones alike. The workers are never alone. They are monitored, recorded, and judged at every moment of their lives. The idea of privacy has long since been erased, replaced by the constant awareness that someone, somewhere, is always listening. Fear becomes not just a reaction, it becomes the air they breathe. The Imperium maintains control through a complex network of watchers. Servo-skulls, floating constructs made from the hollowed-out heads of the dead, drift silently through the factories. Their eyes glow red as they record the movements of workers, their metallic jaws whispering reports to the overseers. Vox casters on the walls repeat the same message. The Emperor sees all. The priests remind them that even their thoughts are not hidden from his divine sight. Every cough, every sigh, every hesitation is noticed. The fear of being seen is constant, and in time, it becomes self-sustaining. The workers do not need to be punished often. They punish themselves with silence, that the overseers enforce this fear with brutal precision. They are half human, half machine, their flesh fused with augmetics that enhance their strength and endurance. Their eyes are lenses that can see through smoke and darkness. Their ears can detect whispers from across the factory floor. They move through the lines with mechanical grace, carrying electro whips and shock batons, their presence alone enough to make the workers tremble. The sound of an overseer's boots is enough to silence 1,000 conversations. One mistake, one moment of hesitation, can end in a public beating or execution. The purpose is not just punishment, it is spectacle. Every act of violence is a reminder of the system's absolute authority. Informants are everywhere. The Imperium thrives on betrayal, turning fear into loyalty. Workers are encouraged to report their peers for the slightest suspicion of disobedience. The promise of extra rations or a shorter shift is enough to make a friend into a spy. Even family members report on one another, terrified of being accused of complicity. The result is a society where trust no longer exists. Every word spoken, every glance exchanged, carries risk. To show kindness is dangerous. To show doubt is fatal. The workers learn to speak in half sentences, to avoid eye contact, to bury every emotion beneath a mask of submission. The Arbeits, enforcers of imperial law, serve as the embodiment of fear. Their black armor and skull-faced helmets are symbols of judgment, their authority unquestionable. When they enter a manufactorum, the entire floor falls silent. They do not need to announce their purpose, everyone already knows. A worker might vanish without explanation, dragged away in the middle of a shift, their screams echoing between the machinery. No one asks where they are taken. No one dares to remember their name. The message is clear. Obedience is survival. Questioning is death. Fear is not merely enforced through violence. It is engineered into the worker's very perception of reality. Every wall is covered with propaganda images of the emperor watching over his faithful, slogans warning against heresy and sloth. Doubt his treachery, work his prayer, the emperor sees. The words are repeated so often that they lose meaning and become reflexes. The workers no longer read them consciously, but their minds absorb the message until it becomes instinct. Fear becomes part of their identity, a constant companion that dictates every action. Even rest offers no escape. In the dormitories, hidden voxcasters play soft sermons while the workers sleep, embedding obedience into their dreams. Some nights, the overseers march through the bunks, scanning for contraband or forbidden texts. A worker caught with a personal item, a photograph, a note, a handmade charm, is accused of distraction or unfaithfulness. The item is destroyed, and the worker is punished to remind others that possession itself is rebellion. The goal is total transparency, total surrender. The body belongs to the Imperium, the soul to the Emperor, and the mind to fear. Technology amplifies the power of surveillance beyond comprehension. In the heart of the factory, data servitors process endless streams of information collected from thousands of workers. Every motion, every heartbeat, every word is logged and analyzed. Efficiency is calculated, loyalty is measured, and deviations are flagged for investigation. A worker may not even know they are under suspicion until the day they are dragged away. The system ensures that no rebellion can take root because no thought of rebellion can survive long enough to spread doubt. The priests play their part by sanctifying the act of observation. They teach that to be watched is to be blessed. The emperor's gaze, they say, is not a burden but a gift. It ensures purity, it guides the faithful, it cleanses the soul. To resent surveillance is to reject his love. Through this twisting of faith, even the act of being constantly monitored becomes a form of worship. The workers are taught to confess not to avoid punishment, but to prove devotion. Guilt becomes a virtue, and submission a holy act. Public punishment is ritualized into ceremony. When a worker is accused of laziness, blasphemy, or sabotage, the execution is not hidden, it is staged. Thousands gather to watch as the priest delivers a sermon, praising the emperor's mercy even as the condemned screams. The overseers activate the machinery, and the punishment is carried out with precision. The workers are forced to watch, to learn, to absorb the lesson through terror. They return to their stations more obedient than before, their eyes downcast, their thoughts silenced. Over time, this environment of surveillance and fear erodes the very concept of individuality. The workers cease to think of themselves as people. They become eyes and hands, functioning within a system that no longer distinguishes between man and machine. They speak in mechanical tones, move with mechanical precision, and feel mechanical fear. The line between voluntary obedience and programmed instinct blurs until there is no difference. The system has succeeded when the workers no longer need overseers to control them, when they control themselves out of pure, reflexive dread. The psychological toll is immense. Some workers break under the pressure, their minds fracturing from the constant anxiety of being watched. They begin to hear the Emperor's voice whispering commands, see the eyes of saints in the shadows, or believe that their thoughts are being read directly. Madness spreads quietly, but even this serves the system. The insane are not pitted, they are examples. Their fate reinforces the lesson that fear is the only path to safety, that sanity belongs to those who obey without question. The omnipresence of surveillance also ensures that rebellion is not just impossible, it is unthinkable. A worker who begins to question their life must first overcome a lifetime of conditioning that equates doubt with sin. Even if they find the courage to whisper their thoughts, they must find someone willing to listen, someone who is not an informant, someone who will not betray them for survival. In a world where everyone is watching and everyone is afraid, such people no longer exist. Fear has replaced community. Silence has replaced solidarity. Generations pass, and the system remains unbroken. Children grow up seeing their parents live and die beneath the same gaze, learning from their earliest moments that to be watched is to exist. Surveillance becomes their comfort, their faith, their reason to continue. They no longer imagine a world without it, because such a world would feel like chaos. Fear is not the enemy of the Imperium, it is its foundation. It keeps the factories running, the workers loyal, and the Emperor's empire intact through the quiet obedience of billions who will never see freedom, but who will never dare to desire it either. In the Imperium of Man, death is not the end, it is merely another form of service. The exploitation of the human body continues even after life has faded from it. For the workers who spend their entire existence feeding the machine of the Imperium, their flesh, blood, and bones are not their own. Every part of them, from the moment they are born to the moment they die, belongs to the state, to the factory, and ultimately to the Emperor. The Imperium wastes nothing. The body of a dead worker is not seen as sacred or deserving of rest, it is a resource. Raw material to be repurposed for the endless needs of a dying empire. When a worker collapses on the factory floor, their death halts nothing. The machines do not stop, the overseers do not pause, and the others continue their labor as though nothing has happened. The body is removed swiftly by servitors, dragged away on metal trolleys, or lifted by mechanical arms into disposal shafts. The process is efficient, cold, and entirely devoid of ceremony. To acknowledge death is to risk compassion, and compassion is a weakness the Imperium cannot afford. The only acknowledgement the deceased receives is a brief prayer recited by an Adeptus Mechanicus tech priest. Blessing the corpse not for peace, but for utility, some bodies are taken to the rendering facilities. Vast industrial cathedrals where the dead are broken down into their components. Flesh is processed into nutrient paste to feed the living. Bones are ground into binding material for construction. Blood is filtered into biofuel, and hair is woven into insulation fibers. The workers consume their dead unknowingly, sustained by the same system that devoured them. This cycle of consumption is not hidden, it is sanctified. The priests declare it an act of faith, teaching that the body continues to serve the Emperor even in death. The workers repeat these words without emotion, because belief is less painful than realization. Others are sent to the Mechanicus reclamation chambers, where death is merely a transition from flesh to function. The Adeptus Mechanicus views the human body as another machine, one that can be repurposed with the proper augmentations. The dead and dying are stripped of their remaining humanity, their consciousness wiped clean, and their corpses rebuilt as servitors, mindless drones of flesh and steel designed for eternal labor. The transformation is grotesque and efficient. The body is fitted with cables, implants, and cybernetic limbs. The face is removed or replaced with metal plating. The brain is lobotomized and reprogrammed to obey. What was once a person becomes a tool, condemned to serve without thought or rest for centuries. The workers fear this fate more than death itself, but they accept it as inevitable. The priests tell them that becoming a servitor is a sacred honor, a final act of devotion to the emperor. In truth, it is the ultimate erasure of self. The servitor does not think, feel, or dream. It knows only commands. It moves when ordered, stops when told, and exists in a perpetual state of mechanical obedience. There is no rest, no peace, no end. The workers see them every day once human shapes, shuffling past with lifeless eyes and silent mouths, and they know that one day, they too will join that endless procession. On some worlds, the remains of workers are not recycled but used as material for construction. Their bones reinforce the walls of factories, their ashes mixed into the mortar of cathedrals, their teeth and skulls embedded in sacred relics. The Imperium builds its monuments with the remains of its people, transforming death into architecture. To the priests, this is divine efficiency. To the workers, it is a constant reminder that even in death, they cannot escape their duty. Their bodies become part of the very machines that destroyed them. There are worlds where death itself is forbidden unless sanctioned by the overseers. When a worker grows too weak to continue, they are not granted rest. They are injected with stimulants, pain suppressors, and cybernetic replacements to keep them functioning. The line between the living and the dead becomes meaningless. The body is treated as a vessel for labor, maintained only so long as it can produce. When it finally collapses beyond repair, it is disposed of with the same indifference as a broken tool. The Imperium's faith in the sanctity of suffering ensures that even mercy is denied. The psychological effect of this exploitation is profound. The workers learn early that their lives have no value beyond their productivity. Death, which should bring release, becomes another form of servitude. They see the servitors, the nutrient vats, the bone forges, and they understand their fate. It crushes the spirit long before the body breaks. They stop dreaming of freedom or heaven, for such ideas have no place in a world where the soul itself is property. The ecclesiarchy tells them that their spirits ascend to the emperor upon death, but even this belief is twisted. The priests claim that the emperor uses their souls as energy to sustain his divine presence. Even the afterlife is labor. The Adeptus Mechanicus has its own rituals for the dead, stripped of emotion and replaced with machine logic. Death is catalogued, analyzed, and processed. The data of the worker's performance is recorded, and the body's parts are inventoried for reuse. Every death contributes to a ledger of efficiency. The Mechanicus sees beauty in this process, calling it the perfection of the Omnissiah's design. The workers see horror, but they cannot voice it. To question is heresy, and heresy is worse than death. On hive worlds, where billions live and die in endless cycles, the dead become a literal foundation. The lower levels of the city are built upon centuries of corpses compacted into the floor. The air smells of decay, masked by incense. Workers walk on the remains of their ancestors without thought. The bones beneath their feet are both history and warning. The dead do not rest. They support the living, both figuratively and literally. As the Imperium's tower of industry rises higher into the poisoned sky, funerals, where they exist, are hollow rituals stripped of grief. A priest reads the rite of utility, blessing the body for continued service. The workers stand silently, heads bowed, not in mourning but in resignation. There are no tears, because tears are seen as waste. Grief is inefficiency, and inefficiency is sign. The body is taken away, the tools are cleaned, and the shift resumes. Within minutes, the absence of the dead is forgotten, erased by the roar of machinery. Only the memory of fear remains, the fear of becoming nothing more than a resource. Some whisper legends of those who escaped this fate, of rebels who died free, buried in secret, their bodies left untouched by the Mechanicus. But these stories are dangerous, forbidden to speak aloud. The priests call them lies spread by heretics. The workers who dare to believe them do so in silence, clinging to the faint idea that death might still hold meaning. In the Imperium, death has been industrialized, turned into another process of production. The body is no longer sacred, the soul no longer free. The workers live knowing that their final breath is not the end, but the beginning of another kind of enslavement. The empire they serve consumes them completely, flesh, bone, and spirit, until nothing remains but dust, metal, and memory, all serving the same unending machine that demands everything and returns nothing. Hope is a dangerous illusion in the Imperium of Man, a flicker of light swiftly crushed beneath the weight of endless oppression. For the workers who toil in the depths of hive cities, on forge worlds, or in orbital manufactoria, hope is a poison, something they are taught to fear as much as heresy itself. It begins early, when they are still children, raised not by parents, but by overseers who teach them the sacred truth, that the Emperor provides purpose, not freedom. They are told that to dream of anything beyond their assigned labor is sinful pride, a rebellion against divine order. By the time they are old enough to understand what they have lost, it is too late. Their spirits are already conditioned to obedience. Their imaginations burned out like the flickering lights of their dormitory corridors. The illusion of hope exists only as a tool, an instrument of control carefully designed to keep the masses compliant. The ecclesiarchy and the administratum have mastered this deception over millennia. They feed the workers just enough belief to keep them from breaking entirely. Sermons echo through the factories, broadcast from voxcasters mounted high on rusted walls. Every drop of sweat is blessed, the priests declare. Every wound, every breath, every sacrifice brings humanity closer to salvation. The workers listen, exhausted and hollow, clinging to these words not because they believe them, but because disbelief offers nothing but despair. Hope becomes a drug administered by those in power, never too much, never too little, just enough to keep the machine running. There are posters on the walls, faded by soot and age, showing radiant images of the Emperor's light shining on loyal laborers. They depict strong men and women smiling as they carry out their duties, surrounded by golden halos and banners of faith. But the real workers, broken and coughing in the dark, look nothing like those saints. They know that the light in those images will never touch them. Yet still, they stare. Because to stop believing, even for a moment, is to risk madness. Sometimes, rumors spread through the heb-block stories of distant worlds where life is better, where the work is lighter, where overseers are kind. No one ever confirms them, yet the stories persist, passed in whispers between shifts, carried by workers desperate to believe in something beyond pain. These tales are the closest thing to hope they have, though they are lies. The Imperium is too vast, too cruel, too consistent in its tyranny for such mercy to exist. But the workers repeat the stories anyway, because lies can be more comforting than truth. There are those who attempt to find meaning in the stars above, though few ever see them. On most worlds, the sky is hidden by smog, by factory smoke, by towering spires of steel. When a rare glimpse appears, perhaps through a broken ceiling vent or a gap between the towers, some workers pause, staring at the faint light beyond the clouds. In that moment, they imagine what lies out there. Other worlds, other lives, perhaps even freedom. But before the thought can settle, the alarms blare, the overseers shout, and the stars vanish behind machinery once more. Hope flickers, then dies, just as it was meant to. The ecclesiarchy teaches that hope must be placed in the Emperor alone. Any other form of hope in change, in peace, in freedom, is heresy. The priest's sermons are filled with paradoxes. They tell the workers to be proud of their suffering, to love their chains, to find joy in their submission. They call it holy endurance, the idea that every act of labor, no matter how small, serves the divine plan of the Imperium. Hope is twisted into obedience. The workers do not hope for better lives. They hope only that their deaths will please the Emperor enough to earn forgiveness. Faith replaces ambition, ritual replaces purpose, and worship replaces humanity. Even when the workers witness horrors, accidents, executions, deaths, they do not allow themselves to question. The illusion must remain intact. If one man falls into the furnace, his comrades recite the rite of purity, telling themselves that his sacrifice was necessary, that his death served the Emperor's will. To think otherwise would be unbearable. Hope becomes a fragile shield against despair, one that must never crack. Those who allow it to falter, those who doubt, are often reported to the authorities for spiritual weakness. Their punishment is swift public penance, branding, or disappearance. The message is clear. Hope must be controlled, never self-directed. The Mechanicus has its own form of false hope. It promises transcendence through augmentation, the chance to become something more than flesh, a machine of purity, free from pain and mortality. For a few workers, this becomes an obsession. They volunteer for mechanization, believing it to be liberation. But the truth is far darker. Those who undergo the transformation lose everything that made them human. Their emotions, their memories, their capacity for love, all are stripped away in the process. They are not free. They are simply reshaped into another form of servitude, bound by programming and faith in the Messiah. The illusion of hope becomes a prison more complete than the factory walls. Occasionally, revolts break out, small, desperate. Uprisings born from the illusion that change is possible. They never last. The Arbites descend with shock mauls and bolters, crushing rebellion with absolute precision. The survivors are paraded before the others as examples, their screams broadcast through Vox speakers as a reminder of what false hope brings. The ecclesiarchy then delivers sermons about the dangers of pride and the sanctity of submission. And yet, for a brief moment, those who watch the rebellion burn feel something they cannot name, a flicker of forbidden inspiration, a ghost of courage quickly smothered beneath fear. In the quiet hours between shifts, when the machinery sleeps for maintenance and the overseers retreat to their towers, the workers sometimes talk about what it means to be alive. Their voices are low, cautious, filled with both longing and dread. One might ask, do you think the Emperor knows our names? Another might whisper, do you think he sees what we endure? No one answers. They all know the truth, but they cannot say it. The illusion of hope must remain unbroken, or everything else will collapse. The Imperium thrives on this illusion. It is its greatest weapon, more powerful than any bolter or chain blade. It keeps billions of souls in line without chains, without walls, only belief. The workers believe that one day their suffering will mean something, that in the distant future humanity will rise and the Emperor will reward their devotion. The priests feed them this lie with every sermon, the overseers enforce it with every beating, and the Mechanicus engraves it into every machine to live. Without hope would mean acknowledging the futility of existence. To live with false hope is to remain a slave willingly. The workers exist in this paradox, trapped between despair and delusion. They pray because they must, they smile because they are watched, and they continue because stopping would be rebellion. The illusion of hope gives them purpose, even if that purpose is nothing more than survival. And so, they endure. Generation after generation, they pass down the same empty promises, teaching their children to find comfort in the chains that bind them. They do not dream of freedom anymore. They dream only of being worthy of the Emperor's gaze, of being useful, of being remembered as loyal servants. Hope, in the Imperium of Man, is not a light, it is a cage, shining just brightly enough to blind those trapped within it.